Thank you everyone for joining our session today. MQTT and Sparkplug, delivering plug and play. I would like to start by familiarizing ourselves with a webinar tool. Take a look around for the chat function and let us know as you join where you're located. I'd like to get an understanding of where people are around the world. Also, please post all your questions to the Q&A tool, not in the chat. It'll make it easier for us to answer those questions. From a housekeeping standpoint, I would like to make the audience aware of upcoming 2023 events. IIoT World Manufacturing Day on May 17th, IIoT World Energy Day on June 28th, IIoT World Smart Building Day on September 27th, IIoT World ICS Cybersecurity Day on October 25th, and the IIoT World Manufacturing and Supply Chain Day on December 7th. We are taking questions at the conclusion, so please post those into the QA tool, as I mentioned. This track will run approximately 55 to 58 minutes, and the hope is that we'll get everyone out on time. It wouldn't be possible, finally, to run this virtual conference without our sponsors. I would like to thank HiveMQ, Hitachi Vantara, GE Digital, and Microsoft for sponsoring this event. Finally, I'd like to introduce the panelists for this event. My name's Jose Marks. I'll be the moderator for this session. My background is predominantly in the telecom world from a connectivity standpoint with industrial spaces. And I've also spent the last 15 to 20 years working on the data side of industrial automation. Spent quite a bit of time with companies such as Teradata, GE Digital, and Hitachi. The panelists that we have today are Ravi Subramanian. He's Director of Industry Solutions Manufacturing, product management leader with extensive experience delivering high quality products and services that have generated revenues and cost savings of over $10 billion for companies such as Motorola, GE, Bosch, and Weir. He has successfully launched products, established branding, created product advertising and marketing campaigns, working with global and regional business teams. Henry Marini is a control systems engineer on a mission to help save and create middle-class jobs. Noble pursuit, I might add. Currently works as a control systems engineer, implementing proof of concept projects using MQTT, Sparkplug B, and other open source technologies. And finally, we have Harold Kirsch, who's head of automation and industrial IT for AMG. He's a dynamic entrepreneurial business strategist with over 30 years of professional experience in organizational and business development. His career to date has mainly been defined by topics: securing the future viability of companies, developing new business models, digital transformation, IIoT, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, automation of enterprise, and other several processes. What I'd like to do now is kind of jump right into things without further ado. And I'll start with Henry to get us going. And basically the question that I'd like to ask is, as our lives become more digitized, what frameworks should we be looking at to help measure the social impact of digital transformation? We'll start there and then run through the panelists for their opinion as well. Go ahead, Henry.
Thanks, Jose. Glad to be here. Really, at the crux of digital transformation is it's a strategy, and it is really driven by technology first, a people-centric view, values-driven, specifically using a vendor-neutral approach, being solution stack agnostic, and it is at the core a fundamental understanding that the way business has been done before is no longer valid in today's way of needing to do business. What we need to understand is factors that might have been overlooked before, specifically around really understanding human psychology, understanding group dynamics, understanding neuroscience and the ways that stress impacts individuals, and collectively society as a whole are far more important than might have been given rise to before. And so what it means is the leaders of today and of the future, including the employees of the future, really need a true mastery of social psychology and understanding how people work together, because what will make the employee in the business of the future is small decentralized teams that are self-empowered to essentially go and solve problems on their own. And that is because really, when you take a look at the business, regardless if it's in manufacturing or even something like a nonprofit, the folks that are on the shop floor, so to speak, really understand what the day-to-day needs of the business are, and they have quite a bit of knowledge. I would argue far more than some of the folks on the carpeted side of the business in what solutions are required and the manner in which people need to work to get there.
Great point, Henry. Harold, kind of would like to hear your thoughts, kind of expand on how do we get that knowledge out of the sort of the operating floor, and how do we broaden that intelligence? How do we broaden that day-to-day knowledge that exists on the shop floor?
Yeah. It's thanks for precising this one, and thanks also for Henry for the introduction, the first topics on that. Look, just become a little bit more precise for my job. I'm working for a special engineer manufacturing company. We are, let's say, solving processual problems of our customers based by huge machines, quite complex systems, right? And in case of as long as robots or KI or whatever something will not be able to structure and engineer such complex systems, the leading factor of our work is the human capital. And what we've learned so far, and what is a driving factor specifically for our digital transformation strategy, it is becoming a social technological factor, which means that from our point of view, from our experience, technology at the end of the day is, let's say, developing much faster than the skilled and the expert people can get a grip on. So the point here is, and this is what we nearly figuring out and work on, is, let's say, segmentation, harmonization, standardization. Make life easier, make it less complex, make it understandable, and at the end of the day, give the people the chance to understand it, and bring them in. My principle on that is quite easy. I don't know if at least the huge people here in the audience have ever dealt with Lego. Lego is a brick thing. Yeah, can you at the end of the day, by standardization, by, let's say, these modular aspect, you can at the end of the day build everything, and it fits every time. Right, and this is more or less the principle what we need to somehow get a grip on. Yeah, and from our point of view is using technology not for driving technology. It's more to, let's say, supporting the peoples out there, the engineers, the mechanists, the service technicians, whatever, something by intelligent and by intelligent assistance systems. Yeah, make the things easier, provide the right data at the right time, at the right place. Yeah, and it's valid data at the end of the day, because we have a data mass problem so far, and who knows what the right things are at the right moment. And at the end of the day, this is what we need to understand, and around that, building, let's say, an efficient training and education system on both sides. Yeah, we need to have a clear, from the bottom to the top, education plan based on a standardized environment ecosystem so far. Yeah, and I think this is more or less the point what we need to establish. Yeah, most of the time I'm coming to situations where I try to provide and try to sell and try to address innovative technology to one of our customers, and the customer said at the end of the day, Mr. Kirsch, to be honest, I do not understand what you mean. And at the end of the day, I will not buy what I do not understand. So it's a deadlock, you know. And this is what we need to work on, right? Simplify the thing, right? Not what we've learned in the initial speech this morning. All these hype words and hype technologies addressed to the markets are understood by, let's say, 5 to 10% of the skilled people out there, right? And this is a massive thing. And another indication is Industry 4.0, yeah, took 12, 13 years after launching at Hannover Mess, still 60% of the projects are failing. By what? Right. And so let's say come back to the topic of the speech today. It means plug and play, as Sparkplug addresses to the market. Yeah, make the implementation easier than it is, or less complex, and just addressed to the high-skilled people. Yeah, this is more or less an imperative, yeah, for our working space. Make it simpler and following at the end of the day the standards of the industries. Because at the end of the day, these will be the coverage, these will be the entry levels, to launch a solution at the end of the day. And these are more or less the disciplines what you have to keep in mind, yeah, in our socio-technology world, the combination of technique and human being, human capital.
That's right. That's right. At the end of the day, I think complexity, or the lack of complexity, will drive the adoption of the systems that we're building today.
Yes,
and you know, that's a great point. And I think I'd like to get Ravi's thoughts on how Sparkplug is enabling, and some of the new features are enabling and complementing MQTT to be a game changer in digital transformation and sort of developing new capabilities for Industry 4.0, specifically in manufacturing.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you, Jose. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you to IIoT World for having me today. Great discussions. I completely agree with the panelists when they talk about digital transformation and how it all starts with the company culture, right? It's like your company culture needs to be aligned to what you need to do, and that needs to be aligned to a true business use case that you have, whatever it be it, right? I mean, like we talked about business continuity, right? How do we ensure that we can train our the new employees that are coming in to the level of like the folks that are retiring, right? Obviously, like manufacturing jobs, you continue to see a lot of retirement happening, and with the retirement, all the tribal knowledge of the folks that are retiring goes with them, right? So how can you use digital technologies to capture some of that, so like the new employees can continue to do what they do, right? So that is a true great business case or a value for a technology like MQTT and Sparkplug, because it serves as that initial frontier. If you look at the data maturity model, you obviously want to be on top of that maturity model, doing AI, doing ML, doing all the use cases that will help out with these things, with the help out with these use cases. But people tend to forget about like the foundation layer, which is basically the data availability, right? How you can ensure that the data is available at the right place at the right time, how you can consolidate OT data, which is operations technology data, with IT data, and to make it like meaningful, so that like you can do all of these things, not just as a one shot, but continuously make that available, right? And bring all the relevant data. And that's kind of like what MQTT Sparkplug does. And Sparkplug as a standard has basically added additional features on top of MQTT, which is basically a publish subscribe based protocol, which is supposed to work on reduced bandwidth, reduced latency, or like where like there is issues with the connections, for example. That's kind of where MQTT started in oil and gas. What Sparkplug has done, for example, is like define like something called a topic namespace, which allows you to ensure that you're able to provide auto discovery. For example, if new systems come about, you want to be able to discover it, which is absolutely important in manufacturing, to enable bidirectional communication within the MQTT framework, because obviously you want to get data from your on-premise to the cloud or to enterprise and vice versa, right? The second thing that it's done is like state management, which is the ability to continuously be session aware in terms of like your SCADA systems or your IIoT systems. That is something that Sparkplug has added. It's also added like the ability to encode the payload, right? Because that's absolutely important, especially when it comes to remote operations and other use cases where security is absolutely important. That encoding of the data is absolutely important. And then last but not least, it's added this whole concept of having a data model, right? Because your factory subsystems are not individual devices sending out messages. It is a whole subsystem. It is like the painting subsystem, or it is the welding subsystem, which consists of multiple different machines. And it's important to have like a clear data model to figure out like which layer is where in the organization. So when you get the information, you know you have a context behind that. So those are the things that Sparkplug has added on top of MQTT to make it more useful for Industry 4.0 for manufacturing. Jose.
Thanks, Ravi. Great points. And Harold, I'd like to go back to you and basically, this almost seems like a contradiction, right? We're talking about plug and play while our environments are getting more complex. And we're barely, in my opinion, scratching the surface of the art of possible. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that sort of seemingly contradictory statement that I just made. You know, we're looking for plug and play, we're looking for simplification, but we're dealing with a never more complex environment. You're muted. I'm sorry.
It is, and this is what I liked at Ravi's speech is, look, it's not the technique to attach to something, right? It is at the end of the day the thing what we would like to gain. Yeah, is it an application? Is it a service? Is it a product? Is it whatever something, right? So top-down data and information are more or less, let's say, the most important things of the game. And so, from my point of view, any mechanism to reduce the complexity of work and technology, at the strict harmonization, and this is also quite necessary and quite important. The standardization aspects of the industry itself needs to keep in mind to provide the whole stack. It is the ideal world in saying, look, I do have, let's say, a full provided MQTT shop out there. Is, let's say, the ideal way of thinking of having some kind of, let's say, plot of the future concepts or greenfield approaches, make it new, make it modern, make it ideal, and whatever something, right? But at the end of the day, the reality bites out there. Give you an idea. Right. Give you an idea. We have at the end of the day, when our production machines. Having more than 5,000 technical objects, between 500 and 1,000 logical objects embedded, right? Yeah. We have 17 product lines with different methodologies. Yeah, it means the one is building on Siemens, the other one is Mitsubishi, Rockwell, whatever something, and there are, let's say, at the end of the day, 7 cultures embedded into these systems theoretically, and then we have 2,500 of these systems out there, most of them older than 20 years, right? So having a clear digital transformation strategy means you have to somehow be able to cover and to leverage the complexity out there, right? And at the end of the day, you have to adapt to the given standard of the existing world. Because renewing everything in such kind of computing thing, it is quite hard, right? And then we have the clear challenge in saying, look, to building such kind of machine took 2 years. It means when we are designing something, it is already old. Because of the innovation cycles and the renewal and patch and release cycles of the fundamental technology. Now, even Elon Musk needs 3 years to build a system and the production site here in Germany. So you know what the challenge means. And this is a clear view to the thing in saying we need to having a clear forecast. We have to having a clear product release cycle management stuff and so on to at least maneuver to what will happen at the moment when the things will, let's say, come to production. Right, and this is some kind of, let's say, collaboration between both sides and the common understanding. between the guys in the middle, the guys who are, let's say, at the beginning of the value chain, being also forced by standards, industry standards, whatever something, and then try to get a clear roadmap, perspective, in implementing such kind of technology on a long distance. Because finally, downtime counts. If there is a defect on the site, and we will tap on an old release, and the machine will have a standstill for 1 day, this is a discussion I would not like to help, And these are the elementary factors,
That's right. That's right. Henry, I'd like your thoughts on that. What's the role of standardization in plug and play? As we heard from Harold, we have significant lead cycles, and we've all looked at deployments that we've done in the past that have taken, months, if not in some cases years, depending on the complexity and the size of the deployment. But does standardization, perhaps even the thought of, don't want to go there yet, but regulation play a role in this process?
Absolutely. Before I offend anybody, I just want to say personally, I went and got my PMP accreditation. So for those that are really leaning into Lean, Six Sigma, continuous improvement, you have to really understand something very particular about standardization. It works for a specific product or a specific process. Now, in Japanese, Kaizen is known as continuous improvement. However, there's a sister concept known as Kakushin, which is innovation. We all might be familiar with the continuous improvement curve over time, sort of like an S curve, and then you sort of plateau. Well, Kakushin takes that and jumps up about some orders of magnitude. And this is what I meant specifically before with the way business was done before is no longer applicable to today. It is important that standardization has its place in a specific product or a specific process, but it is not a valid way of doing business. I can't tell you how many times people constantly misapply the two. There is a time and place where you have routine checks and balances for a specific issue or a specific product or a specific process. When we talk about the semantic hierarchy and you're looking at a specific line and a specific cell in your factory, then you apply these concepts. Overall, they do not fit. And what you need instead to understand is other ways of working. So another often disregarded concept in project management and overall strategic operations is the Tuckman model of group development. And very clearly it states there are phases in which humans go through as they're individually and collectively coming together to work. And it is not a linear fashion. Oftentimes you have folks going from one phase to another. Sometimes they never even leave a particular phase. So standardization absolutely has its place, but it is not the business. And I would even argue so far as to say that the reason why MQTT and Sparkplug work so well, it is because they are so abstract and they prioritize flexibility. I never really understood when I was going through school and even in positions I've held prior, this fervent held belief that manufacturing is supposed to be constant. Quite literally, manufacturing, when we talk about core principles like design of experiments, you are literally working through factors to change to better understand something. Change has always been the one constant and will forever be the one constant in manufacturing, and even just generally in life, that is the only constant you can rely on. So yes, standardization absolutely has a time and place, but it is very specific to a product and a specific process at a specific point in time.
That's right. That's right. Very well said. And I think based on that, how's Sparkplug 3.0 handling that dichotomy in the process, Ravi? We have things like TCK, we have Sparkplug compatibility, we have other things in Sparkplug 3.0. How does that help address the issues that Henry just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely, right. So, and I obviously, like, standardization is only as good as like what you're trying to do with it. So, yeah. So, for example, right, the whole purpose of like the TCK, which is basically a technology compatibility kit for people that don't know what TCK is. And by the way, just backing up a little bit, just for people that don't know what is Sparkplug, where it came from, it is basically managed by a foundation called Eclipse Foundation, which is a open source, and Sparkplug is an open source framework, right? And it is something that was, it's basically started on top of MQTT, which is also open source, by the way, and specifically addresses issues around Industry 4.0 and use cases that are needed to do that, right? And the things that I mentioned are specific to Sparkplug, which kind of like make that more compatible with Industry 4.0 and industrial IoT and so on and so forth, and manufacturing specifically, right? So so the 3.0 specification introduced this TCK, as I mentioned, with the notion that you have a lot of people that are confused, right? Okay, so which vendor should I work with? And obviously, like, vendors can put out whatever they want from hey, because we support this, we are fully compliant, we can do this, we can do that. But we all know that not all vendors are equal, right? Not everyone has fully complied with the open source specification and have done full justice to it. Because in some cases, like, they may not have implemented it fully, and it kind of like it beats the whole purpose of going with them and trying to work on a standardization, if you will. As opposed to that, that's why the whole purpose of the TCK is to ensure that every vendor, every member of the Sparkplug working group is able to test their solution on top of like this TCK. And by the way, HiveMQ actually developed this TCK and contributed back to the foundation. And it's just a simple test that tells you, okay, so are you actually able to comply with all of the key features that Sparkplug has, like the quality of service, for example, the last will and testament process? Are you able to support the birth and death messages to the level that we have defined in the specification? All of this basically, once you've tested it, you've gotten the go ahead. Yes, your solution is good. We provide them a Sparkplug compatible badge, right? It's basically like a badge that they can put on their website. It's something that will be on the Sparkplug Foundation website. And for any customer that's coming along, when they see that badge, that means that we vouch for the validity of that particular vendor and their ability to support Sparkplug. That's what it is, right? I know it's a very simple thing, but it's kind of like it's important for us to go down the path of ensuring that we kind of like all follow the things that Sparkplug really stands for, right? It's not like it's not a me too. It's not like I say I'm Sparkplug compatible and be done with it. You have to prove that you're Sparkplug compatible and keep up with all the things that Sparkplug has put out. So that's what it is to it. So it's to democratize the process. It's to make it easy for customers to choose the right platform, which is based on open source, to be able to solve their problems.
Thanks, Ravi. I'd like to go back to Harold and kind of discuss the non-operational challenges that this brings up. The role of regulation, privacy, chain of custody of data, cybersecurity standards again, sort of how do we take advantage of the tool set and the capabilities and the open source environment while we still have to work in this world that's governed by sort of the non-operational items?
Excuse me. Again, I think I need to just come back to my example in the further round. It is, first of all, I think we need to understand the customer itself, with his environment, with his requirements, with his demands, right? And then at the end of the day, on the long run, when we, for example, as an engineering and implementation company, will get let's say in a closer collaboration, we need to challenge the requirements of these, what you mentioned, the standards. What is the manufacturing X guys are thinking about their standard of how the future world of manufacturing will be. Yeah, well, what will be with the Catena guys in dealing with, let's say, the automation looks like in the future? Medicine guys has the same thing, Gaia X, as I mentioned. And then the requirements of security and so on and so come in. These are, let's say, at the end of the day, more technical disciplines. Somehow there are rules, there are some regulations, it is formalized, and I think at the end of the day, it's okay. And I would like to come back to Henry's speech about the business counts, right? And then we are talking about something like the Supply Chain Act, which means that there is a regulation, a law today coming up or is already implemented into the world, which means that you have to be responsible for everything what you supply to the other one. Right? It means here at the end of the day, specifically when we're talking about open source technology and whatever something, who has the IP of what, and how is it validated, and how does it fit the conformity of the expectations of the rule of whatever something. And this is then our buy-in stuff, back-to-back agreements. Yeah, it means what the customer responds from us or requires from us, we need to feed back to our customer, to our suppliers here these days. Open source. Or at the end of the day, open architectures, or what also Ravi said regarding these Eclipse Foundation stuff, gives flexibility. It means at the end of the day, one of the basicals of Industry 4.0 is system independency, to get adaptiveness and work along the value chain. Closed loop manufacturing, circular economy stuff, and whatever something. The thing which becomes elementary and at the end of the day ends in recycling, means we need somehow to get a grip on that things. And when the intelligent machines with machine-to-machine collaboration, whatever something, starts to communicate on their own level, who secures that it's the right thing and it's permanent, it's validated, it's stable, it's secure, it's whatever something, right? And so these are, it's a big thing, right? It's a real big view to the thing, but these are at the end of the day specifically regarding the innovation cycles and deciding for future-oriented technology. These are more or less, let's say, the entry levels, and then we will go into details. And saying, look, what is the standard, what is modularization, what is the segmentation of the potential technology, and so on, and then decide for the thing. What I've learned so far from Ravi and also from Henry from their speech, the technology here is in the right way, and this is something what we need to prove, right, in specifically under these aspects, because first customer counts, regulation and rules and laws will count, and this is what we need to fit somehow.
I think that's a great point. I like your thoughts on that, Henry. As we become more open source driven, we have this cloud over us. You know, how do we address all of these issues? How do we address the intellectual property? How do we address the competitiveness that's natural in our industry? How do we face these new challenges, or perhaps old challenges under a new umbrella? You know. It's an interesting world we live in. And as we move more and more towards plug and play, we still have to address all of these things that sort of not necessarily cloud our solutions, but have to be taken into account as we develop new and integrated solutions. And as you said, as we bring in innovation into the constant improvement cycle, I like your thoughts on expanding on what Harold just mentioned.
Sure. I wish I had a perfect one-off answer for you for what the solution is, but I can absolutely tell you what the answer is not. For those that might not be aware of it, you've definitely been a victim to it in some way, shape, or form. Microsoft was really the pioneer of this, and still in many ways, its sort of poisonous attitude has jumped onto other organizations. And what I'm talking about is the 3E framework. It's called Embrace, Extend, and Extinguish. And it is a highly effective tool to completely dominate and proprietize a tool, a framework, a software in order to drive out competition. And you're essentially spurring up innovation by falsely merging and acquiring your competitors and then immediately shutting down what their ideas and projects were. The 3 E's is so widely adopted still, although it's not as widely talked about. There have been countless court cases in the 80s and 90s, and Microsoft is not the only perpetrator. You know, other big names like IBM and even Xerox are very, very well known to do this. I can tell you it does not work. Meaningful engagement with not just the open source software technology, the technology stack as a whole is important. You need to have meaningful engagement with the open source community as a whole. This will absolutely challenge the powers to be when it comes to IP law. I mean, I can tell you yet another example of this tried and true method of trying to vendor lock in folks into the digital thread way of doing business is Microsoft literally patented an OPC digital thread solution. Granted, it was solution stack specific, but I mean, come on, this is still a predominant way of doing business. And what I would pose the question to the audience is, you know, this status quo for pursuit of market dominance, is it really helping you, or is it actually hurting you in the long run? Because to have interoperability means to have flexibility, means to not be tied to a vendor, means to not be tied to a solution stack, means to be able to have the freedom to address your custom issues when you need it, not to go and try to obtain a cookie cutter solution, which, by the way, most likely was a result of using the 3 E's to squash out a competitor, because it is in fact a very real threat to many of these businesses. But it is not necessary to stay in this fear-based mindset. Having a business that openly teaches and supports open source technologies, not just exclusive to one, is absolutely a viable business strategy. And there have been many citizen science initiatives that have made successful, even though they might be on the smaller to mid-sized scale, there are in fact small and mid-sized businesses out there are quite successful at doing this. So I can tell you the 3 E's do not work. I can tell you the current way of doing IP law does not work. And I can tell you patenting OPC digital thread solutions does not work in helping the end user and customer. It does not fit in the framework of interoperability.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah,
I would agree. I would agree with that, and like to get Ravi's thoughts on this issue, and how does HiveMQ look at it, and more specifically, looking at it from a Sparkplug standpoint.
Yeah.
How do you address this question?
Yeah, so look, you talked about Microsoft and their patent. I think they had, I don't know if you're referring to specifically to a patent they had on the MQTT over OPC UA. I think they have like a patent on that, right? So which is, to your point, right? OPC UA is supposed to be an open foundation or an open source project. And if people want to develop solutions to it, and then you see one vendor has a patent, it becomes very difficult to convince other people to join this, right? I mean, that's something that shouldn't happen. It's unfortunate. Our position is kind of like the democratization of data. I mean, our sole purpose is that obviously, like we have a broker that's based on MQTT that supports all of the feature functionality of MQTT, right? And we are part of the Eclipse Foundation, like contributing back any tool sets that we talked about. The same thing with Sparkplug, which is kind of like a framework on top of MQTT, with MQTT being like the transport layer or messaging layer. We have Sparkplug as a framework. Now, it is somewhat equivalent to OPC UA, right, in some ways. And we don't tell our customers, hey, you shall use Sparkplug, and that's the only way we'll work with you, right? We'll tell them that these are the benefits that Sparkplug provides, just like I mentioned about the payload, the state management, and it's kind of like a grounds up based framework that was created, like we talked about earlier, specifically based on customer needs, right? So we have a lot of oil and gas customers and others that came to us and said, I mean, these are the problems that we're facing right now with MQTT. Can you help solve that? That's where the Sparkplug framework originated, because of the specific nuggets of information that we got. Okay, what are the things that we need to do to help their use case? And we have a lot of those customers that are part of the Sparkplug Foundation working kind of like to define some of those things. So it's not something, a standard that was created in vacuum and then thrown across the fence so that, and hoping that people would come, right? It's kind of like an agile, almost like a Kaizen method of doing it, where we make them, the people that need to consume it, part of the creation process, and then iteratively we keep improving. Based on the feedback, we added the whole TCK because one of the notions is that I'm confused. Which vendor should I work with? Which vendor should I not work with? I mean, I see some of the vendors, they just sign the check on day one, they're nowhere to be found, right? If their name is there, what is the guarantee that their solution would work and conform to Sparkplug, right? Those are the things that we wanted to weed out. That's the reason why we are a big proponent of not having any patents around open source. And hey, your business is your business. We are all in the business of making profit, but you have to ensure that you give back to the community and make sure that the community can thrive. And then if they want to come to you for additional feature functionality, hey, we have it, right? But at no point do we say that, oh, if your solution, our solution only works with Sparkplug. It can work with OPCUA, right? And there is MQTT over OPCUA, it works. Obviously, absolutely the patent pending from Microsoft, but hopefully that's not an issue. Or if you want to create your own framework based on ISA 95, awesome, we'll support that as well, right? We are in the business of sending the data wherever you need that to be sent in whatever method. If you want to work with us completely, we'll do that. If you want to work with others, we are interoperable with those solutions.
Excellent. Thank you, Ravi. Lastly, I'd like to finish with sort of the future-looking view, if you will. How do we integrate educating society or a greater portion of society, we that work in industrial automation, or a fairly small group? How do we get society from childhood to working professionals to understand how digital transformation impacts them personally and collectively? Ravi, I think your thoughts on the future of digital transformation, we all know that it's an evolving process, like you just mentioned. So how do you envision Sparkplug keeping up with both the industry developments and this social change that's happening? And then what I'd like to do is kind of give a minute to both Henry and Harold, kind of close up on this subject before we move to the Q&A session. But can you expand on sort of where do we see the future going? And obviously, if this was easy, somebody else would be doing it already, right? So not to make this more complex than it needs to be, but like your thoughts on how do we make this more than just sort of a relatively small group of people that are working on industrial transformation?
Absolutely. So when people go out and try to find out solutions for, hey, they want to digitally transform their organization and they're looking out for solutions, it's quite daunting, right? There are so many different ways to skin the cat and so many different ways to do it that it is a complete science project. They actually have to hire an entire team of OT and IT professionals on their side and spend a lot of their time figuring out what that right solution is. And of course, all the vendors are going to be like clamoring for a piece of that. And then a system integrator will come in and then try to do that, right? That is not going to stop anytime soon. But what can help in that use case is going with standards-based solutions, right? Where different vendors can coexist on like a certain set of frameworks that would interop with each other, so that if the customer decides that, this vendor solution is not good enough for me for a variety of reasons, I want to switch it out with somebody else, they can easily do that because they're all kind of like standards-based, right? As opposed to saying that, oh, I've already put in millions of dollars into this project, I cannot afford to kind of like spend another $1 million. So I will use the solution, even though it's not like, it's not good enough for me, or it doesn't cut it for me, right? That's what we have to try to avoid. But bigger than that, technology is, again, like I mentioned before, it's a means to an end, right? It's one of the big things that obviously people need to think about, but it's not the first thing, right? Digital transformation is all about the people, right? What do you want to do? Where do you want to see your organization in the near future? And how that view can help you do better than what you're doing today, right? It could be a noble cause. It could be like I want to become a better Samaritan to the world, right? By reducing my carbon footprint because I produce so much and I get so much profits, but I'm not doing it I'm doing it at the expense of the environment, right? That could be a noble cause. Or it could be that I want to ensure that I'm future-proofing my factory so that like tomorrow I can still run these factories when my workforce is retired, right? How can I have that business continuity? How can I ensure that the disruptions of supply chain I had because of COVID, and what if like the next COVID is around the corner or some other pandemic is right around the corner? I don't have the same issue. So how can I use digital transformation and all the information I can get through that to be able to do that? So those are the things that needs to then filter down to the technology level and then to what really needs to be put in place. And it's a journey, right? It's not like a one size or like one time and done thing. It is a cyclical thing that you have to keep going back and redoing it. So that's my perspective around digital transformation and where technology fits into it.
Okay. Harold, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, sort of your closing statement on this issue.
Look, I think the most of the things are already addressed. Yeah, we've spoken about technologies or techniques like rapid deployment, plug and play, low code stuff, and whatever something. It means there seems to be a common understanding in the software industry that the things are still no longer expert systems. We need somehow to motivate and to easier the access to the thing to make it happen, right? A quite positive experience is what we made, and now we are talking about this technological or human capital stuff. Is we changed our project approach back from waterfall. It means then top-down thinking. Yeah, needs to have a strategy and adapt the strategy. We switched over and changed to agile stuff. And the elementary and quite interesting thing is in this methodology, in this way of thinking, is the user story, which means that the user addresses his pain, his challenge, his requirements to the technical guys, and he is from the initial stage on per sprint, per MVP, per increment, per whatever something epic. He is part of the game, right? And so he will grow with the functionality, with the solution, and this will educate and motivate him to work with the thing. It is some kind of learning by doing stuff, to make it easy. And these guys are then initially part of the game, and this makes, for our point of view, the acceptance, the adaptiveness, and the correctiveness of our solutions, the value, much more easier than before. And having the open source community in background, it means an unlimited space of experts and putting in their experiences, maybe some best practices in the thing, gives us, let's say, a quite open view to the thing, and that's make life easier. The bad side of the medal is we are now responsible for the thing. Which means we need to hook up a support organization for what we provide to the market itself, right? And so there is some back-to-back things, some platform economy, some ecosystem with our partners, what we need to hook up, to having a prolongated workbench for specific tasks and technologies at the end of the day. And these are the opening to the world, opening to the community. I mean, this will be one of the driving factors. And at the end of the day, get the end user, get the guy who is, let's say, then who is using the technology as soon as possible into the game. Yeah, it's quite away from the specifics and the techniques and the Sparkplug and MQTT and OPCOA, whatever, some way of thinking. It means this at the end of the day on our side improves the acceptance of the solutions and the motivation of dealing with the thing from the initial phase massively. It's a quite strong learning curve. And dealing with partners on the partner ecosystem.
Excellent. Great point. Henry, any last words on sort of the future look?
Sure. There's really two important, going back to social psychology, this isn't some pie in the sky or fluff concept. It is a legitimate science. And there's two very important concepts you need to really master and understand when it comes to anything new and anytime you're trying to educate people. There's one called the tipping point, which very clearly states you do not need to take a shotgun en masse approach trying to get your voice out to as many people as possible, constantly streaming it out to them. That does not work. It never has worked. It never will work. The tipping point says when you really get about 10 to 20% of an audience that is really a believer in the idea because they have seen demonstrations that it applies directly to them, and they are able to connect with others in a meaningful way, which specifically in the business case means you don't shill a product to them, then that tipping point allows you to gain access to the broader audience. So that is very important. You do not need to have this en masse shotgun approach. The other thing is what's called the network effect, which is when a platform and an innovation has enough of a following behind it, then simply people want to use that particular thing just because there's social proof that there are so many people already using it. And it can go one of two ways, right? We've seen it not work by having vendor locked solutions where people claim to be interoperable, but they're actually not. And so in the case of MQTT and Sparkplug, though, there is a very vibrant community of folks, primarily consisting of individuals like myself and some other academics that are doing these projects, and they show just how it can in fact scale. And there's even other 4.0 integrators that have shown that these do in fact scale regardless of how big or small your business is. Those are very two important key social psychology frameworks to really master and understand. And I've already seen positions in overall business, adapting to this very clear trend. There's been a proliferation in job titles that some of you might have even come across called software advocate positions, which is a really interesting hybrid role where you take somebody that has a strong technical background and is able to really communicate, and they supplant themselves in a community, whether it be directly going out to a company and or a online community, or even engaging in the open source community by developing code for them, or even just proposing ideas to reconsider. These folks specifically take a servant leadership approach where they are not actively shilling a product. They are simply there to answer questions, demonstrate proof of concepts, and even assist fellow engineers and other technically minded folks, and even business leaders at times, where this particular thing that their business happens to be supporting might fit, but it is a radical departure from what we might now know as the ABCs, which is always be closing, which is such a stupid idea that literally has no backing in science whatsoever, and it just simply does not work. And so these things, I'll give you a perfect example of something I actually had an opportunity to volunteer with, and I wasn't even aware that MQTT was being used this way. There's an animal rehab center in upstate New York. They particularly work with raptors. One line of raptors they work with are red-tailed hawks, and they attach these GPS units, and essentially these hawks are tracked in very isolated and disparate regions, and they want to get various GIS data and conduct research. Well, lo and behold, there's actually a group of grad students who started a small business where all they do is publish not only real-time view of where these birds are, but they can also then apply ML and AI to see what sort of behavioral patterns these birds might do and the ways that interact with the ecosystem. I mean, they have funding for this, and they're not the only ones. In this like 4 or 5 month span that I volunteered to help get this thing going. It's clear that, you know, manufacturing isn't the only area where these concepts and MQTT is being utilized. And so this is a very clear-cut case of what we, again, going back to the tipping point, right? You don't need 100% or 90%. You just need a small 10 to 20% who are really believers through demonstrations and personal use that these work. And that's, you know, that's where the future is really.
Yeah. Just real quick, I know we're out of time, but and to your point, right? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like our company, right? We have 150 plus customers that use MQTT across so many different use cases. We have a lot of people that use it open source. We have a lot of colleges that use MQTT for a variety of reasons. So the use cases are ubiquitous for MQTT Sparkplug.
Absolutely. And, you know, as we've been discussing on this session, I think we're just reaching the tip of the iceberg. We're limited by our imagination here. So it's people like you guys that will keep growing this world and this environment, this landscape. Thank you for your amazing insights and knowledge today. Really appreciate your time. Thank you to the audience for sitting with us for this past hour. Thanks again to our sponsors, HiveMQ, Touchy Vantara, GE Digital, and Microsoft. Your support ensures that we have all of this great content to share. And thank you to the attendees for listening to us today and the great questions. And thank you, Ravi, for keeping up with the questions as we were going through the session.
I was going to say all the questions are answered. All the questions are answered, but if people have questions,
I was looking to bring up a couple, but we're both out of time and out of questions. So thank you, everyone, for a great session.